Frizzle fandom. Rivers of London, books 6, 7, 8. What I liked and didn't like, and what I didn't like is mostly in book 8, so just wait till we get to that. Beverly. Lovecraftian, confusing horror elements. Well, it's not the Lovecraftian horror that I didn't like, it's the way that it was executed in a confusing way. Anyway, we'll get more into that in a minute. First, we're going to focus on book 6, The Hanging Tree. The Rivers of London series stars Peter Grant, who solves various magical crimes in London. And in book 6, The Hanging Tree, we see Peter coming to a lot of these wrestlings of the corruption and privilege of power, as the daughter of one of London's powerful rivers is mixed up in some bad criminal elements, and her mom does not want her to get on the wrong side of the law, even if the law has to be corrupt to make this happen. But I want to take this apart, not just with the London rivers abusing their power, which we'll get more into with Beverly, but with the magic police abusing their power, with the people that they're tracking down and fighting and hunting abusing their power. Over the course of the series, Peter and Nightingale, the good guy magic police, have come head to head several times with different magical practitioners, most notably Varvara and then also some others. And this is always a little dicey, because even if these magical practitioners are criminal, they can't exactly be thrown into jail because they could use their magic to get out. They can't exactly be put on trial for doing magical acts because there's no physical, tangible, scientific proof that a jury would accept. And so, once you've captured and arrested a magical criminal, what do you do with them? You just kind of have to bargain with them, to ultimatum with them, to try to make them stop doing what they're doing, because you can't actually enforce the law in any way except executing them, which Peter is not okay with, and Nightingale is a little bit more okay with it, but going along with Peter, which I like. So we saw with Varvara in the past, they caught her, they gave her an ultimatum, they said stop using magic in Britain, we'll come after you again, and etc. And then a few books later here, in especially book 6, 7, she's just kind of casually on the team, helping train people, and just an ally now. She has just completely gotten away with all of this mayhem and murder that she was helping with just a few books ago. And we see this also reflected with the mother-daughter witches in these books. And that's just them getting away with something because they're too powerful to be disciplined for it. And though I do think it's cute, and I enjoy the character of Varvara being one of the allies now, it is kind of problematic, especially with how deep the roots of this series is in actual crime-fighting policing. But let's look at it a little closer even, with Peter Grant. Because Peter Grant is like a wrecking ball. He is breaking laws left and right. He is doing property damage here, property damage there, bad regulations here, bad regulations there. Peter has a trail, a reign of destruction behind him, and it's an ongoing joke in the books that he just keeps accidentally destroying things. And to be fair, it often isn't his fault. He's just not quite magically good enough to contain the big messes that other people make in his vicinity, and then also sometimes he's also making the messes. But it's a running joke with the other police officers that Peter can go as far as he wants with property damage and never get fired and never get really disciplined because he's irreplaceable. Because Nightingale desperately needs an apprentice, and he's already put so much time and energy into Peter, who is trying his best. So no matter how big Peter messes up, they're not actually going to fire him because Nightingale still wants him as the apprentice. And Peter is now untouchable from the law. Not 100%, I'm sure there's some point at which they'd crack down and say, no more wizard's apprentice for you. And this conflict between Peter being an officer of the law, but also fairly untouchable by the law because of his status as an important wizard's apprentice. I loved that little tension, that conflict that was continually being explored, sometimes as a joke and sometimes as a more serious thing. And this is why I fell in love with the end of book 7. Book 7 lies sleeping. Peter messes up real bad in this book. And though it really isn't his fault, a person is murdered while they're in his custody, which is a big no-no. And he can no longer escape discipline, and he's put on severe probation with the implication that he's never really going to be coming back to his full position. I loved this ending because I love consequences and the shaking up of the status quo in books. It is something that fascinates me, and I wish more authors would do more often. Because we usually get very attached to a status quo in a book series like this, especially something that's episodic, where things are changing from book to book, but the setting, the situations, the basic premise of it all stays the same, like in a TV show. But after a while, even if you want to hold on to that comfortable status quo for the nostalgic joy that it brings, I think books are way more interesting when they're willing to push the boundaries. So the prospect of having from here on out in the series, Peter not being a cop, not being a detective, not getting to work so closely with the Folly, but of course still going on magical adventures, and I assume still intersecting with the Folly quite a bit, that is so intensely appealing to me. Because after 7 books of the same status quo, that's what the series needs to shake it up. And that is exactly the twist that it has been wonderfully building to, with more and more Peter messing up and never consequences, and messing up even bigger and never consequences, just because he's untouchable, because he's such a specialist. And finally, he has messed up in the end of book 7 so bad that it's no coming back from here. And this even ties in to the Latin prophecy in the book, which I had so much fun translating. I did not speak Latin, but I do have Google Translate, and you can put it in all at once or word by word and figure out the best translations based on the context for all the words. And the prophecy in this book, you shall tell the herald of the morning, which is Peter, if he releases the bridge to protect the city, his reward will be exile. And Peter does indeed release the bridge in order to protect the city, and exiled from the police force. Right? It all works out! Or that's what I thought at the end of book 7. And then I read book 8. And we're going to talk about that. Because book 8 opens with Peter finding a new job. With Peter having to have cut the ties to the Folly. He's still getting magic lessons from Nightingale, but he's not really allowed to go there regularly. And he does seem sad and glum about it, but it didn't feel like it had any emotional impact. Peter should have been way sadder, way more emotionally conflicted about having to get this new job after so long, putting so much into working for the police, for the Folly, for all of that. But then there was like barely any emotional punch in this change, and that's when I started disliking book 8. And then, plot twist! He was never actually fired. They just had him go undercover in this new job because they wanted someone to go investigate it. And you can just imagine my disappointment that this book did not follow through on the wonderful shaking up of the status quo, of the real consequences from Peter's actions. It turns out there weren't really any consequences. It turns out that it was all a fake out. And I was excited for this new status quo, and then it was ripped out from under me, and that soured me for a lot of book 8. Because I felt like this new direction for the series was going to be a good one, and then it turned out it wasn't even going in that direction. It was just a fake out. And not only a fake out, but a fake out that made the book weaker. Because now the first part of the book, before you discover that he didn't really get fired, is just so emotionally flat. Because of course they can't have Peter really freaking out, because Peter knows that it's not really getting fired. So obviously his reactions can't fit actually getting fired. But because his reactions don't actually fit getting fired, it doesn't feel emotionally resonant. It doesn't feel important. It's like the quality of these books feels wow. Because suddenly it's like the things that happened in the book don't matter to Peter, because what we think has happened in the book isn't what actually happened. So I wish the books would have just committed to firing Peter, please. I love the gang, I love the Folly, it's a beautiful status quo, and I have a lot of nostalgic love for it. But it doesn't need to be here for the books to be interesting, and in fact, I think the books would be more interesting if we could push beyond it for a while, and maybe even come back around. But let's actually quickly circle back around to something that I did enjoy in these books, especially in book 5, but throughout all of them, which is the personality of Detective Inspector Thomas Nightingale. Nightingale is over 100 years old, but he has the body of a 30-something because he has been aging backwards for a while. And he doesn't really ever talk about this experience much. He has mentioned that it started happening, I think, in the 70s, but it's not exactly a thing that he wants to discuss or knows even why it's happened. But then we have Varvara, who is also a very old practitioner of magic who has been aging backwards for many decades. And so enlightening when she starts talking about her own experiences aging backwards. It's not just physically aging backwards. As soon as she started aging backwards, she felt it mentally. There was a shift. There was a shift in her emotions and personality. Because she's no longer 90 going on 100, she's 90 going on 80. And I feel like the longer we get to know Nightingale, the more we see his very playful, youthful side. there's often lines in these books about, like, his smile looking like a teenage boy. And it just makes me think about the tension inside Nightingale of hundreds of years of memories. But from an emotional personality standpoint, is he a 20-year-old? Is he very youthful? And how does that feel for him? And even more, how's that going to feel a decade from now when he's even younger? And is this why, as the series has gone farther and farther on, the Nightingale has gotten much more buddy-buddy with Peter? At the very beginning, he's like, I am your master, you are my apprentice. And then very, very quickly that dissolves into, okay, you can just call me Thomas, which Peter doesn't. But I wonder at that desire to just say, call me Thomas, because maybe in Nightingale's heart, Peter isn't a guy that's young enough to be his great-grandchild. In his heart, that's like Nightingale's equal, because that's where his personality is. That's where his mental landscape is pointing him. So, magic, messing with your mental state and physical state, and I want more details. I want more theories about Nightingale aging backwards. I'm so curious about it, and I can't wait, because I feel like it's a thing that's going to get explored more. Okay, quick note about the plot of Book 8, which included many tech things, evil magical drones, various forces, and conspiracies. And the conspiracies were too much. I needed a few more pages helping me understand it, because even after carefully reading the book, I went, huh? What was this plot? Who was in charge? Wait, was the mastermind the AI, or this guy, or that one? Or is the AI even real, or was that just a ghost? Or I am excited for the further exploration of this plot, because there is a lot of hints that we're getting into, like, Lovecraftian darkness, tentacle horror, and that could be really interesting, and I like that element. What I didn't like was the plot wasn't spelled out enough, was too confusing. And the more confusing it is, the harder it is for me to really care about the plot. And my final big complaint about things I didn't like about this book, Beverly Brook. Beverly Brook is the goddess of a small river in South London. She is also Peter's long-term girlfriend partner and also the mother of Peter's upcoming twins. And by the end of book 7, I had accepted, okay, Beverly Brook is endgame, and I just need to accept, even though I don't ship them right now, that she's gonna be the love interest for the rest of the series, and I just need to learn to like her. And then we got her in book 8, and she drove me even more insane, and I hate her with Peter, and I wish that they would break up, but also I don't want them to break up because I want their kids to have a nice stable family with 2 parents, and Peter's gonna make a great father. But I still don't like Beverly's influence on Peter and the way that she is manipulative and not really respecting of other people's opinions and needs. Biggest example in book 8. Beverly has the power to kind of mind control and influence people magically. Peter is not okay with this. I agree with Peter. In this book, Peter even confronts Beverly about it, like, hey, isn't this incredibly morally bad? Are you ever worried about this? Could you please stop doing it so casually all the time? Like, this isn't an okay thing. And how does Beverly respond to her loved one and partner confronting her about this serious moral problem? She kind of shrugs it off. She's just like, that's just who I am, babe. You have to get over it. Is it evil for a river to just do what the river does? No. Like, she doesn't accept moral responsibility. She just says, oh, I'm, whatever. Whatever I do is okay because this is who I am. It's just in my nature to mind control people because I'm so powerful. I'm like a goddess, whatever. And just the fact that she isn't willing to admit that it's morally terrible is such a warning sign of how little she really cares about other people. Like, yeah, she cares about Peter on many levels, but the level of caring and respecting someone's decisions, she doesn't, because she doesn't care about letting them have their free will. And it is driving me insane that Peter, this character that I love, is with Beverly, this character that I find morally reprehensible, and that so far hasn't really even acknowledged that what she's doing is bad. She's like, yeah, I acknowledge that you think it's bad, but for me, it's just what I do, man. Get off my case. I know it's very unlikely at this point that Beverly and Peter will break up because they're about to have twins together, and sure, they are likely to get married, and I don't want to put Peter through any trauma, but also I would not be upset if Beverly died. Even better, though, is if Beverly got character development. I would also be satisfied with that. Character development or death. But there are lots of things to look forward to in future books and future plots, including Peter finally being father. which, as I talked about in my last video about the Rivers of London series, is a prospect I'm very interested in, and I feel like the series has been building over many books too. And I'm excited to see how that shakes up the status quo for him, and if that's really going to change the decisions he makes and the risks he takes. I'm also very interested in the character of Tyrell Johnson, newly in need of a job, who might be hiring the Folly. I hope he becomes a reoccurring character, because he was a very nice security guard and very competent, and I liked him a lot. Rivers of London merch! Please go check out my store. I love this series, and I love some designs I've made for it. And also stuff from other fandoms, so go check that out. If you made it to the end of the video, comment with a wave emoji, and let me know what you think of these books. What are you excited for? And do you like Beverly or not? Am I the only one who hates her? Well, maybe hate is too strong of a word. Who extremely dislikes her being with Peter. Thanks for watching.